Hello. I thought I'd make a short film about the town I come from. It's not going to be a very well structured film. It'll just be basically a quick rundown of the history, because I always seem to do the history of things, and just the place as it is. We're on the northeast coast of England, Hartlepool. I live in the headland, which is the older part of the town. It's a very old town, in fact, the headland. It's pre-Roman. The Cuthbert Sharp, the famous historian who came from the headland, from Hartlepool, says that it was a temple to Heracles before the Romans got here. Of course, the Greeks used to do an awful lot of trading right around all the sea areas, and the people in this town back then used to trade with them. It's a natural harbour. It's also a place that's grown with Christianity. It's been a main part of its growth. It was the first place in the northeast of England to have somebody baptised, to have someone converted to Christianity in 560 AD. Though the actual noble people, the kings, etc., of this part of the country didn't convert until around 70 years later, in 627 AD. At that time, one of the king's nieces, I think, St. Hild, one of the King of Northumbria's nieces, St. Hild, became the head of the newly formed friarage down here, where there were monks and nuns. And it was also a fishing port. It was called Hartlepool. Hartlepool was an old Teutonic language word meaning the forest beside the water. And indeed there was woodland around here as well as everything else on this peninsula. The northeast of England continued to have an importance in religious terms. Though they didn't convert to Christianity straight away, apparently there was a lot of fights with the pagans, and there was a lot of Christianity already in Scotland and Ireland, and it was the monks from Scotland and Ireland who came and converted this part of the country. And they set up Lindisfarne Priory, which is off the coast, just further up the northeast coast of England from here. It's the other end of a causeway, it's on an island. That place, in and of itself, was suffered an awful lot of attacks from Saxons, from Vikings, etc. And it had a lot of famous people come from there, including an abbot called Cuthbert, who died in 687 AD. Because Cuthbert was considered someone of great importance, when the Vikings looked like they were going to take over Lindisfarne, Cuthbert's body was dug up in around 995, maybe slightly before then, AD. And when it was dug up, it was found that a miracle had occurred and he had not rotted away at all. He was still fully as he had been when he died. St. Cuthbert was taken and he was buried in Durham. And there was a church built on top of where he was buried. And then later, in the 13th century, Durham Cathedral was completed at that site. Durham Cathedral is a fantastic building, one of the great cathedrals in the world. And it was the seat of the Prince Bishops, the Kings of Northumbria, continuing to have Prince Bishops in this area. In 1066, William the Bastard, as he was known, now known as William the Conqueror, invaded and took over England, and Hartlepool had its name changed to a more French form, from Hartlepool to Hartlepool. Now Hartlepool had meant forest beside the water, or woods beside the water. Hartlepool simply meant deer, a hart is a type of deer, the water. So it doesn't make as much sense, but it was more suited to the wants of the French people who were then ruling the country. William the Bastard commissioned the writing of the Doomsday Book. A lot of people know that it recorded everything and everyone up and down the country. It's not as widely publicised that what happened then was, because he was worried about the northern part of the country being raided by Vikings, etc., and other people, that he simply transferred those things he thought were of real wealth to the south part of the country. Previously, the north part of the country had contained a lot of the real wealth of this country, and it was at that time that the south part of the country became wealthy and the north part of the country has remained relatively poor ever since. Not completely poor. There are some people who are quite comfortable here, but it's a lot poorer than the south of the country. Hartlepool continued to blossom. Durham, of course, with its cathedral, was something that had a holy relic built underneath it as part of the cathedral. The St. Cuthbert, who would never rot. And Hartlepool became the port of the Prince Bishops. People would land at the port at Hartlepool. There was two groups of people who mainly landed at the port of Hartlepool for Durham. There was those who were seeking sanctuary. If you got to the front gate doors of Durham Cathedral and you knocked on the door knocker, you could claim sanctuary. Then no matter what crime you had committed, the church would arrange for you to be able to leave the country freely. You were given 2 days to get from Hartlepool and to register the fact that you were here in Hartlepool to get to the door of Durham Cathedral before they would pursue you. The pilgrims also used to take 2 days from arriving at Hartlepool to reach Durham Cathedral, walking across land and some quite tough terrain. Because, of course, as a pilgrim, there's no reason why you should take longer to do that than a criminal would. Hartlepool became a major centre, a major port, as it was a natural harbour, and a major shipbuilding area. It also became a north-east stronghold over the years, and frequently had forms of protective wall built around it, and cannons in time, etc. In the 19th century, the steelworks became quite big here, and heavier steelworks that could produce good quality steel, and shipbuilding. It became quite a strong shipbuilding town. At that time, Hartlepool, which is where the headland was, saw the growth across the docks on the other side of what was called British West Hartlepool on the old maps. The headland was Hartlepool, the old ridge side, and the other side of the docks was West Hartlepool, which had been farmyard, etc., manors, but became a town of ever-increasing prominence and importance. I have spoken when I was a young man to old people who remember the turn of the last century, and they remembered that there was an awful lot of fights that used to occur on a Sunday afternoon. People would come out of the church, they'd spend a couple of hours in the pub, and then tend to go out to the dockland and fight with the West Hartlepool dockers. And then, of course, next Sunday they'd go to church, confess their sin, then go to the pub, come out the pub, and go down the docks and fight with the West Hartlepool dockers. Fights between the conheads, as they were called, the people who were more fishermen, and the Westie dockers, the people who were more involved in the docklands itself. At this time, a comedian came to appear in our music hall. A comedian who travelled around Scotland, and in Scotland there'd been a tale about a small village which was so insular that when a monkey had arrived on its shore, they'd hang the monkey. He recognised how insular Hartlepool was. For many centuries it had been the habit to keep the fishing boat in the family by having cousins marry each other, etc. And when he recognised how insular Hartlepool was, he applied this song that he'd learned in Scotland to Hartlepool. And that became the legend of the Hartlepool monkey that's known worldwide. Hartlepool became a sporting town as well as it grew in size. The Hartlepool Row was formed in 1879. And were a very, very successful team in the first 50 years of their existence, producing a lot of players who played for England and things like that, played representative in many different places. In fact, they were so successful that in 1890, a representative team was formed and played against them. Though it was mainly members of the Blackheath Rugby Club, who were quite successful further south in England, it was known as the Barbarians. And this was the first match of the Rugby Barbarians that play to this day and play international matches against teams to this day. They have other rugby teams. The main teams we've got that I can think of at the top of my head are West Hartlepool, Tech, Hartlepool Athletic, the Boys Brigade, Old Boys, and Seton Carew teams. I'm sure there are other teams. I apologise if I've missed you. Hartlepool United, well, there was also around 1890 formed West Hartlepool amateur football team, but that didn't last long after Hartlepool United were formed, the professional football team, in 1908. In 1914, Hartlepool was the first place for centuries where a British soldier died in warfare on British land when the SS Seydlitz was sailing past Hartlepool and chose to bombard us. It actually bombarded the headland first, where we had our gun batteries, and the Youth Gun Battery is a recently renovated area where the attack took place. And as well as the Youth Gun Battery, it then bombarded the docks. Again, the old person I've spoken to about it, told me that at the time what happened was the shells first landed, destroying terraces of houses and things like that. And there was an old veteran from the Boer War who told people to get down onto the beach, because if a shell doesn't hit you directly on the beach, the sand absorbs the inertia of the sand. And people who went down the beach apparently stayed safe. Even the odd shell that hit them, the inertia was absorbed by the sand. There were people also who threw everything they had into carts and went to try and make their way across the docks to West Hartlepool. Well, after they'd started their initial bombardment, their main target was the docks. And a lot of those people who put their stuff into carts and tried to walk across to West Hartlepool with it were then killed walking across the docks. Hartlepool continued to add significance as a port and had its own port artillery and garrison artilleries along the shore for the First and Second World War. And after the Second World War, it thrived quite well as a shipbuilding site. The people here were known as very hard workers. And then what happened? The steel works hard. And then what happened in 1959 is that Harold Macmillan, the Prime Minister, after having had a meeting with Eisenhower, the American president, decided to implement an experiment in austerity to help with our debt payments, apparently, and things like that. It was disastrous. It was disastrous to Hartlepool, because Hartlepool was one of the sites first chosen to experiment on. Hartlepool has had unemployment ever since then. That's some, let's see, 1960s, some 50 years, more than 50 years. Hartlepool's had an unemployment problem. In the early 60s, there was a documentary called Waiting for Work, which shows how people then were having to seek work elsewhere and travel out for jobs and then send the money back to Hartlepool, and jobs and shops were closing down, local shops and local businesses, and it was having a dire effect. And people of Hartlepool, who had previously been known as hard workers, were starting to be called bone idle by other people for suffering the policies of a national government that didn't understand economics. Hartlepool United reached its famous period then. Before then there was a first and second division of the English League, and there was the third division, which was the third division north and the third division south. These were formed into a first, second, third and fourth division, and Hartlepool United was in the fourth division. At the time, if you went to the bottom of the fourth division, you didn't automatically leave the league. You could reapply based upon the attendances and the state of your crowd, your ground, and said that you were better to have in the league because of that than maybe the non-league team who would take your place. Hartlepool United have a record taking their time, the record for reapplying under this system. The system lasted from 1958 to 1984, which was 26 years. And in those times, Hartlepool United managed to be bottom of the league 11 times. They'd also managed to successfully ask for re-election 3 more times at the time when they were in the Northern League. And all in all, 14 times they've been bottom of the league without being thrown out of the league. So they're technically the least successful club in Britain. And a lot of people in Hartlepool tend to support teams from other parts of Britain. Though you do get people who go to watch the match. Frequently you'll find people will support Hartlepool United and watch the match, but will support a team elsewhere which they'll enjoy for watching good football and success. We had at that time, in those decades, the building of a nuclear power plant in Hartlepool, just south of Seaton Carew, which is right next to the ICI chemical factory. It's one of the biggest bombs in the world, in essence. I had it described to me. I spent some time with the Red Cross and as a leader in the Red Cross in Hartlepool, and I spoke once to somebody who was involved in disaster management, and he had a map and he had Hartlepool and he marked out there, and he said, this is one of the biggest bombs in Europe, the fact that there's a nuclear power plant right next to this huge chemical factory. He said, and he drew an arc around which was 80 miles away from Hartlepool, and he said, in this area, if this bomb goes up, if something hits it, this area is lost. And I asked at the time, I said, do you mean lost as in it's underwater, or lost as in just everybody's dead there? And all he did was laugh in response. I actually asked the question sincerely. I don't think I've got an answer to this day. We have recently managed to get planning permission for another nuclear power plant to be built right next to the nuclear power plant we've got. When I was a kid, back in the 70s, the dock still had a right of way, and we used to walk the short distance between the headland, old Hartlepool as it was. In 1968, the two Hartlepools had formed together. That was, interestingly enough, when Hartlepools United stopped calling themselves Hartlepools United, because they no longer represented 2 Hartlepools in their eye, and called themselves Hartlepool United, because it was one Hartlepool. They still had the nickname Pools from the old name. But in the 1970s, you could still walk across to what we called West Hartlepool, across the docks. It was a much shorter distance than walking along the docks, as long as you kept between 2 solid yellow lines. And we'd still go down and sit at the dockside and drop a line over the side and go fishing. You wouldn't actually catch much in the way of fish down at the docks. It was better to go the other side of the headland with a proper rod and cast it into the sea if you wanted to catch fish. But people back then did used to seem to catch more fish for eating than they do now. It seems to be more sportsmen now. And what we used to catch at the docks usually was crabs. A lot of crabs were caught on those fishing lines. You'd drop it down the side and you'd feel a tug, and up you'd pull some large edible crab. And a lot of kids used to take them home to their families as well. They closed the right of way in 1977. There'd been a big problem, well, for centuries on docksides with prostitution. And in the 70s, there'd been a problem with an awful lot of dead prostitutes being found on the docks. There was mainly one serial killer, but prostitutes had been found dead on the docks for centuries as well. And they changed the system then. Bit by bit, they put more light around the docks, they closed off the gates, they stopped the right of way. When I was a kid, I remember camping out in the back garden where I live. And me and my friends camped out, and one of them suggested we go down the shops, the shops first. The shops were near a pub, and the pub itself had a short walkway across and to the gate that led into the docks. And I remember knowing that the women who went on the docks were dirty women. They lived in the flats near us, a lot of them. But being quite amazed when I saw people, because we hung around the shops in the shadows in the dark, and saw a lot of women leaving the pub at a certain time of night and walking across and entering the docks, and seeing that some of the mothers of friends, people I knew as friends, were there. And not really being sure about it. I didn't really know what a prostitute was, but I knew it was wrong at the time. Just earning their extra money in a town that had unemployment problems even then, from the sailors. Some of them were right horrors. The sailors must have been at sea an awful long time. Still, we had a steelworks that was still working in the 1970s. Margaret Thatcher shut that down, making the unemployment even worse and shutting down an awful lot of those things that were attached to steelworks. When you shut down one large factory in an area, everything else shuts down around it. And when the steelworks shut down, the posher shops in the town shut down. Things like we had a Bins, which was a department store. If any of you have ever watched I Being Served, it was a bit like the department stores, a bit like Grace Brothers, where you had people on the floor and you had service and things like that. And the town declined even further, and there was a lot of problems because you can't have unemployment for decades on end without there being problems. In the late 1980s, they started to look at the docks as maybe something that wouldn't work as docks anymore. Shipbuilding, they said, weren't going to return, and in the 1990s they had a renaissance on the docks. At the same time, around 1994, they had this idea in Middlesbrough, where they also had their own prostitution problem, that in Middlesbrough they would create a safe area, and that safe area would be an area where prostitutes wouldn't get arrested by the police. It wasn't going to be legalised, but prostitutes and the punters who wanted to go and see them wouldn't be arrested in this certain area of town. It was a nice idea, I suppose. It kept them away from people's streets and things like that, except it didn't, because what happened was having this safe area where prostitutes wouldn't be bothered, or their pimps, or the drug dealers that come with them, it meant that just about every piece of filth across the country was attracted to Middlesbrough. And Middlesbrough really declined. And the prostitutes no longer fit in that short, small area that the police had set aside, because everybody wanted their patch, and they spread out across the town. But that relieved the prostitution problem that had been in Hartlepool. And in Hartlepool, they started what they called was a renaissance, Hartlepool Renaissance, and the Docklands was turned into restaurants, supermarkets, Walmart type shops, large shopping malls, things like that. A museum, which, if we look at the museum and know the history of Hartlepool, the museum's more based on the history of Portsmouth than it is on Hartlepool. We had some people who'd had old skills that helped renovate old ships, and we had a ship called the Ford Giant, which was renovated here. We'd had the Warrior was renovated, the first ironclad battleship renovated in Hartlepool before then, but it's gone down to Portsmouth. But the Ford Giant's here, and we have a nice museum in fake Dockland, based more upon Portsmouth than Hartlepool, but a fake Dockland that show things from the past in the Napoleonic times. Hundreds of millions of pounds were spent on this project, and a lot of the money disappeared to private contractors and private companies and things like that. A lot of money disappeared on things like reports being written. I know people who got paid £80,000 for writing a report on something. £80,000 just for writing what was basically a small booklet. And I also know people who plagiarised the information they got to put in those booklets. All that money that was supposed to renovate the area didn't do it. I know if the road in Concert, they had the same types of money spent after their steelworks had shut, and they have a thriving industrial park. We don't. We have lots of closed shops around where the docks used to be on that area. Some of the big supermarkets are still open, obviously, but a lot of the other shops that were supposed to be near them are sort of closed. And across Hartlepool, we have restaurants shutting down and opening up and finding it difficult to stay open because people don't have the money, because we still have massive unemployment. And if we can't bring tourists in from elsewhere, which we have, maybe there's one, well, we have history, but it doesn't attract a lot of tourists. We have a lot of closed shops, a lot of pound shops, shops that sell things for £1. That would be £2 in America. a lot of payday lenders. Anyway, back to the football. The league in Hartlepool, the league in England used to have a first, second, third and fourth division. For some bizarre reason, they've renamed them. It's all to do with marketing and things like that. The first division is called the Premiership. The second division is called the Championship. The third division is called League One. It's third, but it's called One. And the fourth division is called League Two. For a while, around the turn of the millennium, Hartlepool United were doing surprisingly well and pushing themselves. They had an energetic young coach called Chris Turner, who'd previously been a goalkeeper for Manchester United and a goalkeeper for Sunderland. I'd seen him play, and he was a fantastic player. Seen him play live. I've been to the ground at Sunderland and seen him play. And he had new ideas about the squad actually getting fit and trying to play football and trying to win games. Fantastic ideas in Hartlepool. And he had a number of years' success before he left. And during that time, we got our most famous Hartlepool United supporter. Meatloaf apparently is a Hartlepool United supporter, though he was unhappy we lost our coach. He said it himself that he liked the coach we had. Apparently he's been to the matches at Hartlepool and watched the matches. And in 2005, Hartlepool United had managed to get themselves into the third division, what's called League One, what I'll call the third division. And they even got themselves in the playoffs at the end of the season with the chance to go into the second division, which is something for the team that had been the most successful, the least successful in Britain. That they were nearly in the second tier of football. But they lost in the playoff final. I remember that weekend watching the playoff final at home on the Saturday. They played on Saturdays and Sundays at Wembley, and watched them on Saturday, and one of their players got sent off, and it sort of knocked the team right out of kilter, and in the end they didn't lose well. They lost poorly for a team that had played so well all season. Funnily enough, on the Sunday I went out to watch the other playoff matches for the other division in the local pub, and in that pub was Hartlepool United team. And including the player who had been sent off, they all seemed to be having a whale of a time, enjoying themselves. I wasn't sure how to feel. I suppose at the end of a hard season where they'd worked hard, they'd maybe let themselves down in the last match. Maybe they deserved to go out and enjoy themselves. I know some other people in the pub will mention that maybe they should be feeling more sorry for what had happened the day before, but I suppose you can look at it both ways. Anyway, that was Hartlepool's heights. They tend to have fallen down again. At the moment, they're hanging around most seasons in the middle of the fourth division. They can't afford to let themselves get to the bottom of the fourth division again, or League Two as it's called, because re-election no longer happens now and they would drop out the league. So they tend to manage to survive, and they're staying relatively where they are, not as successful as they were. I said to a friend not so long back that when I was young and didn't have much money, it was only a couple of miles walk to Hartlepool's ground, and I used to walk a couple of miles. And at half time they used to open the gates, and you could go in and watch the second half for free. And I remember him turning around and saying, "Yeah, but when did they open the gates and let people out?" Anyway, that's a quick rundown of the town I live in. Not much more to say about it.